This morning, I want you to remember with me how powerful our message as Seventh day Adventist is. And in order to do that, we need to go back to John chapter 1. And when you read John chapter 1, verses 1 to 18, you see a beautiful preface about the Gospel of John that explains who Jesus is, what his mission was, and his relationship with the Father. But after John, the disciple, is done with explaining a little bit about Jesus in John chapter 1, verses 1 to 18, he introduces another person in John chapter 1, verses 19 to 28. And that is John the Baptist. And when we get to John the Baptist, we see an interesting dialogue between him and the multitude that gathered to listen to him as he was baptizing people. People were intrigued about the mission that John the Baptist had. And they asked him, "Are you Elijah? Are you a prophet? Are you the Messiah?" And he says, "No, no, no. I'm none of those things that you're telling me, but my mission is to announce that the Messiah is among us." So when we get to John chapter 1, verse 29, there's a beautiful statement, and I'm sure you have heard this before in some way or another. And this statement tells us the mission of John the Baptist in a very clear way. And before we read John chapter 1, verse 29, let me say, even though John the Baptist is not a prophet like Isaiah, who prophesied the birth of Jesus hundreds of years before it happened, even though John the Baptist is not like Daniel or Ezekiel, who are considered big characters in the Bible when it comes to prophesying and telling God's people what's going to happen in the future, either at a local setting or in terms of what would happen in the end time. John the Baptist plays a very important role because he announces the first coming of Jesus Christ. And this is what he says in John chapter 1, verse 29. The next day, John saw Jesus coming toward him and said, "Look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." This is such a powerful statement that emphasizes and tells us in a nutshell who John the Baptist was and what mission he had. Basically, he's simply a messenger. He's announcing that Jesus is here, that the Son of God is here. And as simple as that may seem, Jesus acknowledged that there was no greater prophet than John the Baptist, because this mission, this special task that he had of announcing the coming of Jesus, made him stand above every other prophet. Remember that in the beginning of the devotional thought, I said that this message, the message for this morning, had a lot to do with us as Seventh day Adventist people. And let me tell you why. Because in the same way that we see John the Baptist preparing God's people for the coming of the Messiah, the first coming of Jesus Christ, in the same way, I believe that Ellen G. White was the human instrument that God chose to prepare his people for the second coming of his Son. And it's very sad to see nowadays that the average Seventh day Adventist has no clue, literally no idea of how powerful and wonderful the writings of Ellen G. White are. But more than that, I am afraid that we are not studying the Bible enough to understand the prophecies that are explained to a greater extent in the writings of Ellen G. White. As a matter of fact, I would say this. If I could summarize the writings of Ellen G. White They all come down to this. She wanted to prepare God's people for the second coming of Jesus. She doesn't say anything new. There's no new light in her writings. She is simply repeating, like John the Baptist, that Jesus is coming for a second time. And in this case, he's not coming as a servant, but he's coming as a king. And another way I could summarize Ellen G. White's writings would be that everything she wrote goes around, emphasizes, and points to the three angels' messages. My dear friend, my dear colleague, my dear professor, my dear faculty and staff, I want you to understand that as Seventh-day Adventist people, we have a wonderful message. And like John the Baptist played a very important role, Ellen G. White and our church and you and me have a very important role to play. It is time for us to understand that we need to prepare ourselves for the second coming of Jesus, and we need to prepare others. We need to tell others what's happening in our world. And I don't want to get into details about what's happening in the world because I would take longer in this devotional thought, but let me just tell you this. I strongly believe whatever we are seeing right now happening in our world is the beginning of the end. And I am sure we need to study our Bible more. We need to be able to explain the prophecies that we know to others. And if we are not sure about them, it's time to study. It's time to read Ellen G. White's writings. It's time to get back to our Bible and remember that Jesus wants us to be ready, and he also wants us, like John the Baptist, to tell others that he's coming. May the Lord bless you. May this message stay with you through the day, and may you be able to remember every time you wake up that you're a Seventh-day Adventist with a wonderful message, with a wonderful mission, and with a wonderful purpose to accomplish in this world. God bless you.